In this lesson, we're going to be talking about software development lifecycle. As a business analyst, software tester, project manager, or anybody that is involved in building software products, you need to understand the life cycle of software. You need to know how software is being developed within the team. So, as with everything in life, it's always important for you to understand the different life cycle. Even as humans, you go through different life cycle. The first stage is where you're a fetus, you're just developing in the womb, and then where you're born, you start to take baby steps, you grow to teenager, and then you go through that life cycle till we eventually die. Right? So that's human life cycle. It's the same thing with software as well. There's this life cycle that every software development effort goes through, and you understanding the life cycle gives you a lot of advantage because you know exactly what role you play in helping to move the work forward, in helping to be a critical player in the whole process. So first, what is this software development lifecycle? What does it look like? For example, so the first stage is project initiation, right? We've talked about project initiation during our discussion about project management lifecycle as well. And we're familiar with the concept of, project initiation, which means that this is when we do things like feasibility study, understanding the project scope, developing business case or project charter that gives us overall direction about what we want to do in the project. Now, we know that project management lifecycle, is applicable to any type of project. We also discussed the different type of project. So there can be construction project, there can be software development, there can be healthcare project. Depending on the project, you would not typically go through the same life cycle. So we're going to be focusing on software development life cycle in this lesson. So the project initiation stage is typically going to be the same as with any other type of project, right? Technology, process improvement, healthcare, construction, research, or any type of project, you would typically have similar, activity happening in initiation phase where people are trying to understand project scope, like what is this project about? Why are we doing this project? What problem are we trying to solve? How feasible is this project? In terms of understanding that is key for you to be able to proceed or actually even implement the project successfully. For example, if we're trying to develop like a new pill to cure cancer, right? And we're doing the feasibility study right now, I'm not sure that there's any pill to actually cure cancer, right? So you can see that right off the bat, you can quickly determine that, this is not actually doable. This project is not doable, right? But if we're doing a research and development into cure for cancer, then that's another case. But if you're specifically trying to say here is a pill, anybody that takes it get healed from cancer, then at the moment, maybe in future, definitely we would have that and it would be nice. But right now, there isn't any solution for that. So our feasibility study might fail, or more likely to fail. And then it just gives us a lot of perspective into saying, look, this project is not feasible, we won't be investing, right? But imagine it is something feasible, like we're not wanting to build a website and that will move our business forward in terms of getting new customer, communicating our product better, improve the relationship with our customer, and then that is feasible. There are a lot of projects that happens every minute on building website, so that is feasible in terms of being able to develop a website. But it might not be feasible in terms of budget, right? Depending on the organization, they might not actually have a budget for it. So you need to look at feasibility in terms of every aspect of it, are we able to actually do this project? And do we have the resourcing? Do we have the right people to work on it? Things like that. So at the end of the day, you will have all those conclusion or recommendation in your project charter and business case document. And that's typically the output of your project initiation. Now, when we have a project that has been approved to go further, like go into development, right? Being implemented. So what next? So a typical software development life cycle, when we are done with, we have our business case or we have our project charter, formalizing start of the project, the next thing for us is requirement, gathering and analysis, right? So what do we do? Then remember what we talked about, project plan, where we would start to plan about all the activities of the project and, look at the time, the budget, the scope. Now we're focusing on scope here. So, we'll develop a project plan, we'll develop requirement definition in terms of what are the requirements for this project, what do we want to build, what is required of, or what is the need, right? As we know, requirements are representation of a need. So we define the requirement for the project, and once we have requirement, we will work out a project plan on how we will deliver on all the requirements for the project. So requirement definition is like our scope, right? And the plan to deliver on our scope is what we focus on in our project plan. Then we would gather more requirement on business requirement, solution requirement, and try to get approval for that. So basically, we have different type of requirement. Can be business requirement, which is what are the things that we need as a business that would then move our business forward. Those are business requirement. Like, okay, we want a website so that we can reach more audience as a business or potential customer. Solution requirement are things like we want a login feature or we want a booking solution, right? That would allow people book for our service. So that is like a solution requirement. And again, at this phase, you need requirement approval. So when we've done all this work, defining requirement, the different type of requirement, and formulating a plan for that, but then we need to actually get approval that, all these requirements are set to go. Like, there are things that we should implement. They are needed, depending on this context. And all those things or information will then be documented in our business requirement document. So that you will find all this information and more in our business requirement document. So these are some of the artifacts that you would find at the requirement gathering or analysis phase. And a business analyst plays a big role here. And you will learn more about this as we go along in the course. So you learn more about the key roles you play. We talked about the fact that you are going to be gathering requirements from stakeholders, working with stakeholders. So you need to definitely be able to articulate all of these business requirements, solution requirements, user requirements, and try to get approval for them, formalizing it into a business requirement document. So the next stage is the design phase, right, of the software development lifecycle. So in the design stage, you would typically, depend on the type of design, it's just like a construction project. For example, you need an architectural design to be able to visualize what this house will look like when it's built, right? What the foundation will look like, what the structure will look like. The same thing for software as well. So we can conceptualize design like, in collaboration with a solution architect. We will build the solution architecture. Like, what will this software architecture look like? In more sophisticated software development project, you need a more sophisticated, architectural design, showing us how this software will run, what technology, what is the infrastructure need, all of that will be represented in the architectural diagram. And a BA, based on the business requirement that you'll be able to articulate and explain to the solution architect and the team, be able to come up with a conceptual design, like an architectural design for the solution, right? Also, the other type of design that you need, for example, we can see things like UI UX design, mock-ups, prototype of the application. So it has a design phase. We would come up with all those type of design. Then we would review the design. Of course, you don't want to go, work on an architectural diagram or work on a UI UX design and just go implement it without actually reviewing with the required stakeholders. So you need to be able to review with stakeholders so that you can get their buy-in, and it gives you that validation that you're working on the correct thing. You can't just come up with a draft design and then run with it. So you need to actually review it with the appropriate or relevant stakeholders, and then you can now distill that into more design. It can be process flows, it can be swim lanes, just to give more clarity on what is required. Use case diagrams, those are very important diagrams that you need to actually come up with to give more clarity. Also, as with requirements, you need to also get approval. Right? Approval is important. It's also a point of validation that you need. You need to validate that your requirement is good enough, would meet the project objective, and you're going to be building the right product and solving the right problem for your stakeholder. Now, once all the design is approved and you have consensus, then you can then move to the build state. So a building state is when we're actually developing. So the developers are actively involved here. And we will still talk about the different roles in typically software development team, right? So, but the developers will build. That's where they write the code. They start to code based on the requirement and the design that the business analysts, in collaboration with other members of the team, have been able to articulate, right, and gotten approval for. So they would also, start to code or build the application, and as part of their coding standard as developers, they need to typically write unit tests. So unit test is a form of validation at the code level to check that what we're building is correct, is right. Right, so you have unit test in the code to test the logic of the application. Now, a BA does not really function in terms of writing unit tests. It's just good for you to know that, as the developer writes the code of the application, there's something called unit test that you need to be able to validate at the code level the logic of the application. Right. So after unit test, they also need to do code review with their peers. So they definitely need to get other peers, because when we do something, we need to definitely get a second eye so that we are sure that we're validating for correctness or verifying. So developers do pull requests where they get somebody else to review the code, or their manager reviews the code before it is then merged, right? So it's then deployed to the test environment. So it's the next stage of the software development lifecycle. So when we build something here, we want to test it, right? We want to test for correctness. I mentioned unit test here and specifically pointed out that it is at the code level. This is done by developer. But here, this will be done by the QA or tester. So they are testing with respect to the requirement here. Like, yes, this requirement is doing what it should. For example, a login requirement. User should be able to log into the application. Right? The tester will be checking that, hey, indeed, I am able to log in successfully with my username and my password to the application. Now, this is not on the code level. they're actually, exploring, testing the application and documenting their findings. Another requirement can be sign up to the application. Then here the tester would be testing the sign up application, functionality of the application, testing the sign up functionality of the application, ensuring that when the right parameters is set, the system allows users to sign up on the platform correctly. So things like that are what a tester would typically do, and they will do it at system level as well, right? So system means that the application, a system has subsystems. So at this level is unit. They are coding like login, they are coding like sign up, so different unit, transaction, depending on the application. But system level, it is being integrated already. All the different components like sign up, log in, log out, perform transaction, download receipt, depending on the application, is tested at the system level. As you know, you can't, when you sign up to an application, if the login is not implemented, then you will not be able to log in, right? So for system testing, we expect that all the functionality, all the modules are already integrated, working as a system, as a whole, and that's what we mean by system testing. User acceptance testing, or UAT, can also be done, and a BA also has a big part to play here. And what typically happens here is that the users, the guys or the stakeholders that you've articulated requirement for at the beginning here, are all invited to then help with validating that this system behaves, according to the requirement that they've given you. It works as expected, things like that. So a UAT is a very critical point in your project, and depending on the software development methodology, we'll talk about that subsequent lessons. You might do UAT, but it's very good to do that so that your users are across what you're doing. They can check and give you feedback about what has been developed so far. And if, for example, your solution involves moving some data from one system to another, then you need migration as well. So if a bank is replacing maybe their legacy system, a system that is out of date, and they are building a new one, because they already have customer on the legacy system, that is the system they're trying to replace, they need to be able to move those data, the customer data, to the new system when it is fully developed and ready to go live. Because you don't simply want to tell all your customers to go and re-register, right? That would be ridiculous. You lose customer and trust. So you need to be able to plan for migration as well, so you can move customers seamlessly to your new system without disrupting operations. And when we implement and maintain, it's simply saying that, so when we've tested everything is fine and we want to start to operationalize this, we will then implement the solution that is deployed to the live environment and make sure that all the operational standards are accepted. So it means that you just think about it like your laptop. When you download an app on your laptop, it is working on your operational environment, which is working on your laptop. You can use it, right? But you're not aware who built it, who tested it. You understand? Your own as a your role as an end user is to use it and make sure you have a good experience. So here the team would deploy the application and make sure that it is easy for the end user to use it. So it is called like you're operationalizing the application. And as you can see, whilst we're at this stage of design all through to implementation, a business analyst is just focused on documenting, even from the requirement discussion. Your role primarily here is documenting, clarifying, documenting, managing scope changes, and managing the scope is important factor for a business analyst as well. You need to have a change control process, which means that if somebody wanted to make update to any of the requirements you've gathered and gotten approval for, then there has to be a process they follow. They can't just say, hey, no, change this, and another one says, hey, change this login thing, another person they change this receipt, and everything is chaotic. So you need to have a change control process where you manage a change log, and then you can make update, prioritize, measure the impact of the change before it is implemented. So just to recap, a typical software development will start with initiation, where we know the business case, we have authority to actually start the project, and then the business analyst will work to define the requirement, work with stakeholders to articulate, to elicit requirement from different stakeholders. And then we have the design phase, where we start to work on the solution design, architectural design, another type of design like UI/UX design, interface design, and you're able to get approval for that as well. And then the build stage is where the developers will actually build the application, make sure they are doing their own unit testing of the application and code reviews, so that what they are building has quality built in. And then the testers are testing, validating, making sure that what we are working on, the system under test, works as it should. And then we can support that with sessions like user acceptance testing, and get approval for migration if there's migration components in the project, and then we operationalize it and continue to maintain it as we go. And then of course, as you're working through all of this, you also need to start to train people on how to use the application so that they can support the end users if there are any issues or any support issues. Now, the software development lifecycle in words. So project kickoff, we've talked about the fact that you determine the scope, know more about the feasibility of the project, like how can we actually deliver this project, as we talked about. Requirement gathering and analysis. This is an important stage where we need to gather input from all stakeholders on their requirement, all the subject matter expert as well, so we know what their requirements are, and then we can work on that. And then design phase, we need to definitely come up with different designs, such as user interface design, architectural design, or programming or security design for the project. And we would get into development or build, where we would actually develop the application, making sure we follow the coding guidelines, and this is done by the developer. Testing phase, where we find and fix bugs or defect, making sure that we follow the test best practice as well. The program works as it should, it's functional, it is working as a system, right? Not just unit, and it is delivering on the objective of the project. Then deployment is where we actually, we're fine, everything is good, we've gotten feedback that we're ready to operate it in the production environment. So we then deploy this application to the production environment, and then operation is and maintenance is where, now that this is now operating environment, we need to maintain it, so that we can support our customer to have seamless experience. They enjoy using the application, and they'll be able to recommend it to other customers.